What up, though? I understand you might not be able to stand on your square when you see some shake. When you see some shake and it knock you down, when you get up, sit down. All I ask is that you pay close attention to the timeline, the years that these events are taking place. We would do well to understand that we speaking about actual, factual, regular schmegler degular peoples and the times in which they existed. The only things that I ain't include in this show is your unique story. Encyclopedia.com. European migrations to American colonies, 1492 through 1820. And remember, in your mind, not necessarily you who been here before, but you who ain't never been here. In your mind, somebody took you from somewhere else. Somebody took your ancestors from somewhere else and brought them here. Okay? And it's okay to think that, because that's what nurturing and nourishing, i.e., education, do to you, especially when it's by strangers who don't love you. European migrations to American colonies, 1492 to 1820. In the 3 centuries following the voyages of Columbus, 1451 through 1506, to the Americas, the world was transformed by a massive transoceanic movement of peoples, the largest in human history up to that time. The migration of several million Europeans to the Americas during this period was fundamental to the formation of the New World Society, New World Society. And not only is that a concept, but I'm pretty sure it's the name of some organization, New World Society. Look it up. Let me know. From the Atlantic ports of Europe, principally of Britain, Spain, and Portugal, wave after wave of settlers, rich and poor, took ship seeking their fortune beyond the seas. Between 1492 and 1820, approximately 2.6 million Europeans immigrated to the Americas. Between 1492 and 1820, approximately 2.6 million Europeans immigrated to the Americas. Across the period, slightly less than half of all migrants were British, 40% were Spanish and Portuguese, 6% were from Swiss and German states, and 5% were French. Annual rates of immigration climbed steadily across the 3 centuries, from 2,000 annually before 1580 to 8,000 per year in the second half of the 17th century, and between 13,000 and 14,000 per year in the 18th and early 19th centuries. 3 principal phases of movement can be identified. The first century and a half was dominated by Spanish and Portuguese immigrants, who made up 87% of the 446,000 settlers leaving Europe between 1492 and 1640. Remember, between this time, it is said that they came and got your people, that they start coming to get your people. Now, it take resources to come get your people. Your people lived quite a distance away. So it took, the people who they say is your people and the people you think is your people. It took quite a bit of resources to go get your people. Not to mention, not just the resources to get over there, but also the resources it took to break your people each and every time. Now, think about that. The second phase, lasting from 1640. Now, understand these people, these Spanish and Portuguese and Swiss and German and French and British. It said rich and poor. These were not the king and queen's men and women. These people was thirsty, begging for a popsicle. Let's shake it. The second phase, lasting from 1640 to 1760, saw a threefold increase in numbers of immigrants. During this period, 1.3 million settlers left Europe for the New World. And understand this, just because someone says the New World, it doesn't mean that this place magically appeared or magically was created seconds before the European settlers got here. The New World, it's the New World to them. It's new opposed to their world that they'd been living in. And why did they want to leave so bad? Why did that many people want to leave everything they've ever known? Well, you have to ask yourself about today, in your lifetime, in your parents' lifetime. Why do so many people from all over the planet leave everything they've ever known to come to your house today? Many of the British, French, Swiss, and German settlers who immigrated during this period arrived under labor contracts that typically obliged them to work between 4 and 7 years in return for the cost of their passage, board, and lodging, and certain payments called freedom dues. Okay? They had to pay their bus fare. They had to pay their bus fare. They had to pay their rent. And certain payments called freedom dues. Freedom dues were made by the master to the servant on completion of the term of service, which typically took the form of provisions, clothing, tools, rights to land, money, or a small share of the crop, tobacco or sugar. See, you were told that these are the things that your people, your ancestors engaged in only after they were, quote, slaves, end quote, where they weren't getting paid anything. They were being forced to labor for free. And then after that, they were giving these benefits, the benefit to be able to buy their freedom or freedom dues. They were given board and lodging by their master. You were told this about your people, but here we're speaking of immigrants, settlers, as they say. Now, during this time, where were your people? You know where they were? They were here. These people were coming to help settlers who had come before them, or the missionaries and the men of war that came before them. They were coming to settle on these unoccupied portions of soil in America. Why? Because they thought it would be a better life here than the one they were experiencing at home. The final phase of early modern immigration from 1760 to 1820 was once again dominated by free settlers and witnessed an enormous surge of British migrants to North America and the United States. And understand, during this time, the United States only consisted of a few states or 13 colonies or how many ever states on the eastern seaboard. And each colony, I'm not sure how many people occupied each colony, but from these thousands of settlers they're bringing in, I'm pretty sure they were some of them. But some of these colonies, I'm sure, could have had 20 settlers. Some could have had 1,000. Some could have had 100. But they wanted to fatten up these settlements. The Europeans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Afro-Eurasians wanted to solidify their stake in your house, on your soil. They wanted to take your stuff, take your people's stuff. These British migrants made up more than 70% of all immigrants who crossed the Atlantic in these years. In the late 15th and early 16th century, in the late 1400s and early 1500s, the decision by Spanish and Portuguese monarchs to take possession of the New World and establish colonies governed by the crown required the transfer of large settler populations, of course, so that they can use those men to fight. Against who? Who were they fighting against? They would have you believe that they were fighting against Native Americans. But see, Native American, that's a new creation. That came later. So who are the people that they needed all these settlers so that they can present a large front? Well, that's where your genealogy comes in. That's where the burden is on you to figure out who your people are and were and where they were. Besides the plunder of American Indian societies, not Native American, American Indians. Native Americans find the term Indian offensive. Why? Because they don't want to be called someone else. They don't want to be called you. But even today, they act like you. They try to act like you, imitate you. Spanish discoveries of silver mines at Potosi in Peru and Zacatecas in Mexico during the 1540s provided a significant stimulus to immigration throughout the remainder of the century. In the long run, however, the most important development that encouraged large-scale immigration of settlers from Western Europe was not so much the pillage of Indian civilizations and the discovery of precious minerals as the production of consumables in high demand in Europe, notably sugar, and to a lesser extent, tobacco. It says, in the long run, however, the most important development that encouraged large-scale immigration of settlers from Western Europe was not so much the pillage of Indian civilizations. Now, when they say things like this, in the mind, it potentially creates a picture of Indian civilizations or people that couldn't take care of themselves, people that were weak, people that posed no obstacles. Think about this today. Your people, your friends, all the niggas that you know have always been a problem to any foreigner who's ever come here. So the whole notion that settlers from Europe were just going to come and pillage Indian civilization is foolish, because it wasn't easy then and it ain't easy now. Gentlemen, hidalgos in Spanish, government officials, merchants, servants, artisans, soldiers, planters, and farmers were among the tide of Europeans who embarked for the Americas in the early modern period. One vital distinction between them was whether they arrived free or were under some form of contractual labor obligation. Of the latter, the great majority were indentured servants, British, French, Germans, who made up about 500,000 migrants between 1500 and 1800, and who worked under specific terms of service. So if convicts, let's keep going. Convicts and political prisoners contributed about 129,000 bound immigrants. In addition, an indeterminate number of men and women who were servants, for example, Spanish, in the service of an official, priest, or gentleman, and who might themselves be of relatively high social rank, made their way to the New World. So it speaks of the latter, the great majority were indentured servants, who made up about 500,000 migrants between 1500 and 1800, and who worked under specific terms of service. Convicts and political prisoners contributed another 129,000 bound immigrants. Bound immigrants. So apparently they have their labor force who are going to work for the colonies, right? So why would they go to Africa or thousands of miles away after they've come here, which was a tremendous amount of resources and labor, and then go thousands of miles away to steal strong people? Are we to assume that these people who came over as poor laborers, servants, convicts, prisoners were up to the task of going to steal anywhere between 12 to 100 million people, and the resources that it took to go get those people? Are you telling me that these colonies that were just starting, that needed these people to come over and kind of beef up these colonies, you're telling me that these people had the resources to go and steal a bunch of people on regular trips back and forth? And what makes you think that they had the power to do that? Across the entire period, certainly no less than 25% were servants, convicts, and prisoners. During the peak years of servant immigration in the second half of the 17th century, the figure was closer to 50% indentured servants, made up between 70 and 85% of settlers who immigrated to the Chesapeake Bay and British West Indies between 1620 and 1700. Did you hear that? In British and French North America, cheap white labor was crucial to the early development of colonial economies and predated the adoption of enslaved African labor by several generations. Listen to this. During the peak years of servant immigration in the second half of the 17th century, the figure was closer to 50%. It says across the entire period, certainly no less than 25% were servants, convicts, and prisoners. It says those 50% made up between 70 and 85% of settlers who immigrated to the Chesapeake Bay from Europe and to the British West Indies. So they're sending Anglo-Saxons, Caucasians, Afro-Eurasians, French. They're sending these people not only to the Chesapeake Bay, not only to the east coast of North America, but also to the West Indies, not only to the Indies, to America, India, but to the West Indies as well between 1620 and 1700. Then it says cheap white labor. Now, when they say white, think of the people who are considered white today. Anyone from Afro-Eurasia, which is Africa, Europe, and Asia, they're all one landmass. When they come here as foreigners, they are considered white. Okay, keep that in mind. I'm not saying what the complexion of these white laborers were, but I'm just letting you know there's no such thing as white. The paper that I'm reading from is white. There's no such thing as white humans. There's no such thing as black humans. Okay, so what does it mean, and who were these white laborers? Cheap white labor was crucial to the early development of colonial economies. Servants came from a broad cross-section of lower class society, embracing child paupers and vagrants, unskilled laborers, those employed in low-grade service trade, domestic and agricultural servants, and poor textile workers. So we just gonna pass up the beginning of that paragraph. Servants came from a broad cross-section of lower class society. What does it say next? Who did they embrace? Child paupers and vagrants. The great majority were young, between 16 and 25 years of age, male and single. Sound familiar? Among 16th century Spanish immigrants, women never made up more than 30% of the total. And imagine the lives of those women and girls being amongst these convicts, servants, vagrants, unskilled laborers, poor textile workers. The great majority were young, between 16 and 25 years of age, male and single. Imagine the lives of the less than or the 30 or less than 30% of the women who came. Deplorable. More than 3/4 of the servants who left England in the 17th century were men and boys, rising to over 90% between 1718 and 1775. A French engages departing from the Nantes and Bordeaux in the early 18th century. Over 90% were male, and between 67 and 70% were 19 years of age or less. Free immigrants, those able to fund their own transportation to America, were an equally diverse group. Hundreds of thousands of independent farmers and tenants immigrated to set up farms and plantations. They came here to set up farms and plantations. Plantations were already here. You'd have to look up whether plantations were an Anglo thing over in England. Alongside them from all parts of Europe was a steady flow of lesser gentry, professional men and artisans, merchants, factors, teachers, doctors, priests, clergymen, accountants, ministers, weavers, smiths, carpenters, and others, in continual demand as the colonies expanded and matured. What distinguished them from servants was not only the possession of some capital to set themselves up in America, but also personal or political connections. Now, don't forget, as we move along, remember the numbers of these people. We're talking hundreds of thousands. The most that we've spoken about is 1 point whatever million. Think of this when you think of yourself as 13% of the population. Think when you constantly hear that these people are the majority here in America. In continual demand as the colonies expanded and matured, what distinguished them from servants was not only the possession of some capital to set themselves up in America, but also personal or political connections. Free migrants tended to be older than those who arrived under labor contracts, and they were more likely to arrive with their families, kin, or friends. Such family or kinship connections were of paramount importance in stimulating movement from Extremadura in Spain to the New World, for example, and also influenced to a lesser degree free immigration from Britain and parts of Germany. As American commerce flourished and channels of communication were strengthened, the cost of passage fell and colonies became increasingly attractive and accessible. Whether free or unfree, immigration from Europe to America was intensely regional. During the 16th and first half of the 17th century, the origins of Spanish immigrants were heavily skewed toward the southwest. Andalusia alone contributed between 1/3 and 1/2 of all migrants from Spain. In the late 17th and 18th century, the character of Spanish immigration changed dramatically, with far higher numbers of people moving from the poorer provinces of the North Coast, the East, and from the Balearic and Canary Islands. French migrants came chiefly from northern and western provinces and the Atlantic port towns of Rouen, Saint Malo, Nantes, La Rochelle, and Bordeaux. Most migrants leaving England for America in the 17th century came from London, the southeast, East Anglia, and the West Country. The 18th century, by contrast, saw large-scale movements from northern England, Ulster, southern Ireland, the western districts of Scottish borders and lowlands, the Highlands and Hebrides. German immigration embraced a wide variety of regions in the Protestant areas of Palatinate, Nassau, Hesse, Baden-Durlach, and Württemberg, as well as the Swiss cantons of Basel, Bern, and Zurich. Here it says European immigrants to America 1500 to 1820. You can go over this in detail if you like. European immigrants to America 1500 to 1820. 1500 to 1580, we have Spain 100,000, Portugal 90,000, Britain 0, total 190,000. See, they have it all detailed. And in other sources, they actually have people's names and complexions and hair color and eye color and how they were built. Roderick Gordon, a Scot who immigrated to Virginia, confided to his brother in 1734, "A pity it is that thousands of my country people should stay starving at home when they may live here in peace and plenty, as a great many who have been transported for a punishment have found pleasure, profit, and ease, and would rather undergo any hardship than be forced back to their own country." Horn, 1998, page 51. America was described by one settler as a paradise where newcomers had naught to do but pluck and eat. Horn, 1998. They are speaking of the peaches, the peaches, the peaches. They just pluck the peaches off the trees and eat. If not paradise, the New World offered the possibility of a better future for those who risk moving to America, and if they survived, a lifestyle that would have been impossible at home. So the next time, like they say in church, turn to your neighbor, and if that neighbor is an Anglo-Saxon, understand this is what their ancestors were thinking about. America was paradise, and they ain't went home yet. And guess what? I don't think they going home, man. Sorry, man. I don't think they going home, man. This is the allegory of the continent, 16th and 17th century Renaissance art. Volume 1, Allegory of the Continents. Featuring the earliest paintings and statues of American, Indian, and African tribes depicted side by side in some of the oldest castles and churches of Europe. This is the Kubach, St. Magnus. This is a church in Germany. This is a church in Germany. Very beautiful. And here, if you look closely, there is a painting. The church in Germany. Take a look. Now, on that painting, these are the people representing America and Europe. America being represented by the Indian, the American Indian on the left, and Europe being represented by the woman on the right. And as you can see, nothing to see, no Native Americans here, right? Only your ancestors. And guess what? They're not African. You know why? Because this is the depiction of Africa on the left, and on the right is the depiction of Asia. This is from 1690 to 1693. It says, glorification of the heart of Jesus through the four continents, left to right, America, Europe, Africa, Asia. Okay? So they knew full well the difference between an African, right here on the left, see? And then, curiously, on the right is how Asian is represented. We go back up. On the left, America. On the right, Europe. Europe looks very similar to Asia. But they knew full well the difference between an African and an American, right? And mind you, I'm not saying that all the people of that soil portion that is now termed as Africa, all those people are the same, because they are not. Just like Just like a nigga who in Chicago is not necessarily the same as a nigga in New Mexico, okay? Just like you as different as your cousin as you are from a stranger on the street sometimes. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is nobody was stupid. They knew the difference. They knew that there were Americans and that there were people from the soil portion that is now termed as Africa, which there are many different complexions of people on the soil portion that is called Africa. Many different complexions, many different types of people. Just like here, there are all types of Americans, but they're all American. And today it seems that the American is the one that don't know the difference between an African and an American. So hey, they just say, "Hey, I'm African American. Let's shake it." This is Gutenberg, Muhldorf am in. This is a castle located in Germany. This is a castle located in Germany. We're paying attention to the paintings in that castle. I believe this is the ceiling. This is something painted on the ceiling. And this is the allegory of the continents. This is how they saw the people of the different continents, as they call them continents. They soil portions, pieces of land, whatever. We don't know what to call them because people have been giving us our thoughts for all these years. We've never actually thought about what we think about shit. Somebody tell you what something is and you believe it and ride with it. No? Okay? Okay, so on the painting in the castle, remember? Where is this castle located? Is this Germany as well? Let's go back up. Yeah, this is Germany. This is Germany. It's a castle in Germany. And these are the paintings in that castle. And this particular image is a representation of Africa. See? That's a representation of Africa. Okay. In that same castle, this is a representation of America. Right? They don't look too different. They don't look a lot. They don't look all that different. But they are. Just like if you look at me and you, we don't look all that different, but we are. This is how they saw America. This could be your grandmother, your mother, your sister, your cousin, your auntie. You already know. It's not difficult. This woman, this is the American Indian. This is how the planet saw you. The planet knew you were the American Indian. And guess what? Remember the dates, right? This is 1700s. This is early 1700s. You look the same today. Your auntie, your sister, your cousin, your grandmother, your mother, they look the same today. They look like this woman today. Look what she got on. Look what they painted her in. Look at the clothes. Look at the feathers on her arm. It's always feathers when it comes to us Americans. When it comes to us American Indians, it's always feathers. Just like today, if you got a fedora, it got to have a feather in it. It got to. Your people from the 70s, they always got the feather in their hat. So this is the representation of America in that German castle. Okay. If you got a castle, you ain't just letting nobody paint nothing on your ceiling. You at least want it to be accurate, right? Accurate representation, right? This is Europa. This is how Europa is painted, right? You would expect this. It's easy for you to understand that, right? See? Look at the bottom. It say Europa. That's no big shock to you. You're good with that. You feel that. That's nothing. But see, that image of America, that sting, that means you got to wake up. This is Fulda Castle, Southern Court of Honor. This is a castle in Germany. Quite opulent castle. This is the castle in Germany. Come on, let's go in. The door open, let's go in. Okay, this is a painting in that castle. America. See that? Right up under it is the illustration, the painting of America. You see them people the same complexion as you and your family. Now, don't think for a minute just because they make us all this dark complexion, dark brown complexion, which some of us are, all of us got relatives who this color. We also got relatives that's lemon meringue color, that's strawberry color. You know what I mean? They call them red. They call her red. We got the people you call yellow bones and all that. The dark fudge brown. We got the milk chocolate, caramel, and all that. We understand that. These people was writing based on the people who they saw. Somebody walk up to you and two of your family members and all y'all dark brown, and then they say, well, the Americans, they are dark brown. Yeah, but at the crib, your people, you got people who light skin, you got people who red bones with freckles and all that. Don't let them fool you. You gotta start thinking. And look at the picture. It's always a lion, always the American lion. You know it's more tigers and lions in captivity in America than it is in the wild, that it is all around the world, right? Why do you think that is? Because they just start grabbing lions and tigers from other places on the planet and start breeding them. And now the breeding program was so good that it's more here than anywhere else? No. When these settlers came here, you got to understand the canopy was thick in America. The trees was thick. The woods was thick. The moisture was heavenly. The liquid oxygen was keeping your hair nice and soft like cotton candy. Yeah, it was lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. All in them woods. And guess what? Instead of us killing all of them, why not put them in cages and make a profit off of them from people being able to see them? And when I say people, I mean foreigners who hadn't seen them before. Because I'm pretty sure that's why people, every time you see them, they walking around with bows and arrows. They walking around with tomahawks, spears, because you might encounter one of them lions. But in this painting right here, in the castle in Germany, you see the shorty. He's near the lion, like the lion a part of the family. Can you imagine the relationship that our ancestors had with nature? Now, under that, there's another painting. And this painting is a depiction of Africa and the people of Africa. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And don't say, oh, that couldn't be the people of Africa. They too light. No, the Khoisan people are light people. And when you say Africa, an African, who are you really speaking of? I mean, the Arabs right there. It's all one landmass, right? So who are you really speaking of? Here is the depiction of Europe, which no one questions, even though you should question. Because should these people really be considered or depicted as Europe? Or should it be people who perhaps, let's move on. And here we have the depiction of Asia. This is the Fürstenfeld Assumption. This is a church in Germany, a huge, massive church in Germany. A beautiful church. Amazing. And as you can see, there are paintings all around. The picture looks even better when you're looking in the actual book. And then, I mean, if you go visit this place, clip the link to the image or send the image in the comments. Okay, let's do it. Check it out. This is the ceiling. We're looking at the ceiling. If you look right there, the painting on the ceiling. Now let's see. Remember, it's the allegory of the continents, so they're depicting the continents as they see them. America. So this woman represents America in the sculpture, or this seems like a sculpted piece. At this point, we've all seen Native Americans online, okay, making videos. People who say that they are Native Americans, we see them online making videos. There are ample Native American videos. Native American videos are always at the forefront. Whenever you put in American Indian, anything that has to do with America in the early times, a bunch of Native American videos come up where these people who they are, I guess you could call them pretendians. These people, with the long, straight hair, pale skin people, you can't really tell the difference between them and an Anglo-Saxon, a Chino, or Roman, you know what I mean? We see these people, but have you ever seen any that look like her? Look. And she has an alligator on the bottom near her. Alligator in America. Swamps and all that. You've never seen a Native American that looks like this. You know why? Because she's not a Native American. She's an American Indian. And guess what? American Indians don't all wear the same shit. Just like we don't today. Every time you see a Native American, I don't care if they're from the east, west, north, south, they all wear the same clothes. They all do the same rhythmless two-step. They all beat that drum with no rhythm, and they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, "Let's shake it." I wish I could imitate that scream. It's hilarious. This is their depiction of Africa, where they have the elephant. I'm not sure why the African depictions always have the elephant, because the woolly mammoth, the ancestor of the elephant, was a prominent figure here in America. Let the books tell it. So this is the depiction of Africa. Kind of look like an Arab, right? This is Asia. Yep. With the camel. And if you know, the camel has a long history in America as well. It's an indigenous animal to America. And yeah, they take these animals all over the place, and, you know, to keep the lie alive. This is the depiction of Europe. Okay. Now, Munich, Nymphenburg, Pogadenburg. This is a palace in Germany. Amazing palace in Germany. Wow. Right on the water. This is a palace in Germany. And as you can see, wow, now this is a room. This is a room, and it had to have a black and white checkerboard floor, didn't it? It just, oh my God, people never quit. Beautiful room, beautiful room. I don't know what I think about the black and white floor. It's almost like the floor shouldn't be, the floor should, it should just be the table in the middle, and then all around the table it should be water or something like that. But as you can see, the ceiling has a painting on it. Let's see the painting in a little more detail. Let's get a little closer to it. That's the ceiling. One of the most amazing ceilings I've ever seen. This is the representation of America. That woman. Let that sink in. Everybody know who you is. And look, she got her quiver of arrows. She got her bow. They always kept the bow and arrow. You know why? Because of them lions, tigers, and bears we just saw. See, the animals weren't, see, we didn't put the animals in zoos. We lived with the animals. And if you look below her, you see what looks to be alligators or some ancestor of the alligator. We didn't put the animals in zoos. If we respected the animals, they respected us. They got too close. Boom, we got to lay them down. But you got to be ready. And you learned that from a young age, I'm sure. I'm sure. But look at the sister. That's a sister. Come on, you can't. It's undeniable. I mean, it's too many of us out here that got a relative that, look just like her, or a friend. You know somebody who looked like her, period. Stop. It's unquestionable. But you still want to call yourself an African American or a black. This say America. This is an American Indian woman. This is a true American. The only American there was, is, and ever will be. She got the feathers on her head. Know what time it is. She got the earrings, got the pearls on her neck. This is Africa. This is Africa. And you see they got the little monkeys at the bottom or whatever, but you seeing what I'm seeing? That look like an Asian. That look like an Asian. An Asian with a bow. I told you. It's Afro-Eurasia. It's all one soil portion. And this is Europe. And then they got Europe, got a few feathers on the head, and then Europe got a spear. And you see the dogs down there. Europe got the dogs. They brought them over here. Now, the pit bull is like a part of the family now. The pit bull is an honorary American now. And this is Asia. This is Asia. Looks very similar to Africa, right? Okay, let's move on. This is the Westover manuscripts containing the history of the dividing line betwixt Virginia and North Carolina, a journey to the land of Eden, AD 1733, and a progress to the mines, written from 1728 to 1736 and now first published. William Byrd, Edmund Ruffin. Remember, we're speaking of 1733 here. We just came out of the paintings in castles in Germany and churches, and they were in the early 1700s. And now we are in the Westover manuscripts by William Byrd, and this is 1733. This for all y'all who don't understand who the only Americans that were, are, and will be. Hopefully, after this show, you won't have any questions on who the real Americans are. The only thing, like I said in the intro, like I said in my when I started off the show, the only thing that I ain't include in this show is your unique story. That's for you to do. That's not my burden. I'm heavy into my story, and it's a fascinating story. Reality is much, much, I won't say stranger than fiction. I will say much more interesting. And my story is much more fulfilling than his story. Although, because I know my story, I know where my people fit into his story. The Westover manuscripts containing the history of the dividing line betwixt Virginia and North Carolina. And I know a lot of y'all people come from Virginia. Yeah, some of my people trace to Virginia as well. Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, the whole thing. All these places is the same place, man. Y'all see them lines on the map and they just F y'all head up, man. Remove the lines on the map, man. Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina. Once of them Anglo-Saxons came and started slicing up the pie. Okay, here we go. History of the dividing line, run in the year 1728. Before I enter upon the journal of the line between Virginia and North Carolina, it will be necessary to clear the way to it by showing how the other British colonies on the Main have, one after another, been carved out of Virginia by grants from His Majesty's royal predecessors. All that part of Northern America continent now under the dominion of the King of Great Britain and stretching quite as far as the Cape of Florida went at first under the general name of Virginia. The first settlement of this fine country was owing to that great ornament of the British nation, Sir Walter Raleigh, who obtained a grant thereof from Queen Elizabeth of ever glorious memory by letters patent dated March the 25th, 1584. And all this time, you was thinking that the British, the Anglo-Saxons were the salt of the earth. You were thinking that they had it all. and you had nothing. But come to find out, they wanted to be where you are and where your people were. Remember, they said it was paradise. They called it paradise. And the people who were here in paradise, you just saw their depictions of those people on the ceilings of the churches. The paintings, remember? The castles and the churches, they painted the Americans. They painted the people who were the inhabitants of paradise. But now they call them people on you when you getting too close to them. Now they don't want to live next to you. Some do, some don't mind, but they don't want to live next to you. As a matter of fact, they gave you an identity that tied you to a soil portion that they came from. And they stole your name. They stole who you are, the American. How did they do it? By being patriotic, right? That's all it takes, is to be patriotic. And now they more American than you. You took on the name of the place that they come from. You know, African American. Afro-Eurasia, calling your hairstyle, calling the hair that grow out of your head. The way the hair grows up out of your head is known as a what? Afro. Yeah, it's known as an afro to y'all who act brand new. But we call it a natural. The first settlement of this fine country was owing to that great ornament of the British nation, Sir Walter Raleigh, who obtained a grant thereof from Queen Elizabeth of ever glorious memory by letters patent dated March the 25th, 1584. But whether that gentleman ever made, and remember early on we talked about the mass immigration from what, 1520 to 1820. 15 something to 1820, right? This is the patent dated March the 29th, 1584 is what they just said. But whether that gentleman ever made a voyage thither himself is uncertain, because those who have favored the public with an account of his life mention nothing of it. Damn, did they just tell us that he came here then, but he really didn't come here? That they don't really know if he came here? Oh my God, the confusion. These worthy commanders, for the advantage of the trade wind, shaped their course first to the Caribbee Islands, thence stretching away by the Gulf of Florida, dropped anchor not far from Roanoke Inlet. They ventured ashore near the place upon an island now called Colleton Island, where they set up the arms of England and claimed the adjacent county in right of their sovereign lady, the Queen. Sovereign lady, the Queen. And this ceremony being duly performed, they kindly invited the neighboring Indian to traffic with them. They invited the Indian to the Indians' soil. These poor people at first approached the English with great caution, having heard much of the treachery of the Spaniards. You hear that? These poor people, I'm telling you, man, these people, the most unappreciative people you could ever encounter. These Afro-Eurasians, these Anglo-Saxons, these Caucasians, Romans, Chino, these are some unappreciative people. They come to paradise and then call the inhabitants of paradise poor people. These poor people at first approached the English with great caution, having heard much of the treachery of the Spaniards, and not knowing but these strangers might be as treacherous as they. But at length, discovering a kind of good nature in their looks, they ventured to draw near and bartered their skins and furs for the baubles and trinkets of the English. Now, understand who's writing this. They're always going to make themselves seem more favorable. And did you hear this? It says, and not knowing but these strangers might be as treacherous as they. But check this out. But at length, discovering a kind of good nature in their looks. Yeah, because they had on a 17-piece suit in 1,000-degree weather, tropical weather. These first adventurers made a very profitable voyage, raising at least 1,000% upon their cargo, amongst other Indian commodities. They brought over some of that bewitching vegetable tobacco. And this being the first that ever came to England, Sir Walter thought he could do no less than make a present of some of the brightest of it to his royal mistress for her own smoking. They brought us some squares, some organic squares. As it happened some ages before to be the fashion to saunter to the Holy Land and go upon other quixote adventures, so it was now grown the humor to take a trip to America. They want to take a holiday to America. The Spaniards had lately discovered rich mines in their part of the West Indies, which made their maritime neighbors eager to do so too. This modish frenzy being still more inflamed by the charming account given of Virginia by the first adventurers, made many fond of removing to such a paradise. Again, paradise. Your house is always described as paradise. Why would you want to go somewhere else? Why would you want to connect yourself? Why would you want to call yourself something that says that this ain't your house, that paradise is not where you sprouted up from? Happy was he, and still happier she, that could get themselves transported, fondly expecting their coarsest utensils in that happy place would be of a massy silver. This made it easy for the company to procure as many volunteers as they wanted for their new colony. But like most other undertakers who have no assistance from the public, they starved the design by too much frugality. For unwilling to launch out at first into too much expense, they shipped off but few people at a time, and those but scantily provided. The adventurers were, besides, idle and extravagant, and expected they might live without work in so plentiful a country. They might live without work. These wretches were set ashore not from Roanoke Inlet, but by some fatal disagreement or laziness, were either starved or cut to pieces by the Indians. The ships that carried them made a shift to find more direct way to Virginia and ventured through the Capes into the Bay of Chesapeake. The same night they came to an anchor at the mouth of Powhatan, the same as James River, where they built a small fort at a place called Point Comfort. This settlement stood its ground from the time forward in spite of all the blunders and disagreement of the first adventurers and the many calamities that befell the colony afterwards. The 6 gentlemen who were first named of the company by the crown, and who were empowered to choose an annual president from among themselves, were always engaged in factions and quarrels, while the rest detested work more than famine. They wanted somebody to do it for them. Wow. Does this sound familiar? I mean, they called you lazy, right? And a lot of the foreigners who come here are fed the same story before they come here, that you are lazy. And when they get here, what do they say? And not all of them, of course. But you hear quite a few saying that, the Americans, they say black Americans or African Americans, and that's because that's what you call yourself. But properly, the American Indians are lazy. But here we see that listen, the Anglo-Saxon, the European, the Afro-Eurasian, the Roman, the Chino, see, check this out. They detested work more than famine. These found the first adventurers in a very starving condition, but relieved their wants with the fresh supply they brought with them. From Kikotan, they extended themselves as far as Jamestown, where, like true Englishmen, they built a church that cost no more than £50 and a tavern that cost 500. So they built the church. It said, like true Englishmen, they built a church that cost no more than £50 and a tavern that cost £500. So they built a church and a bar. This is who they are. This is who these people is right now. This is where the whole bar concept came. And y'all want to go out there a weekend and party and drink yourself crazy with this fire water. Who I don't recommend that? Nobody. If you never had a drink, don't have one. They brought you the two of the most detrimental things to life. They brought you to church and they brought you a bar. They had now made peace with the Indians, but there was one thing wanting to make that peace lasting. The natives could by no means persuade themselves that the English were heartily their friends. Yeah, of course, because they was not. The Indians are generally tall and well proportioned, which may make full amends for the darkness of their complexions. Add to this that they are healthy and strong, with constitutions untainted by lewdness and not enfeebled by luxury. See this? You wasn't always like this. You've taken on the very nature of the foreigner. You've taken on the nature of the foreigner. They gave you the church. They gave you their bar, they tavern. You've taken those things. You've made them a part of the fabric of who you is. The fire water and all that. And it says the Indians are generally tall and well proportioned. The Indians that they saw. We know we come in all shapes, sizes, complexions, all that, which may make full amends for the darkness of their complexions. Add to this that they are healthy and strong, with constitutions untainted by lewdness and not enfeebled by luxury, which enfeebles you today, or some of you. Besides morals and all considered, you heard that? Besides morals and all considered, so did you really need the church? Did you really need the Bible in order that you may have morals? Did you really need to? We're not hearing anything about the fact that you are Hebrew, right? And how could you be? It's a language. But we don't hear anything about you being a Hebrew. I haven't heard anything about Hebrew, Israelite, Moor, any of this stuff. Christian, Muslim. I haven't heard anything about any of these things. Besides morals and all considered, I cannot think the Indians were much greater heathens than the first adventurers who, had they been good Christians, would have had the charity to take this method of converting the natives to Christianity. For after all they can be said, a sprightly lover is the most prevailing missionary that can be sent amongst these or any other infidels. A sprightly lover. So what they're doing, they pimping. The only way to get the Indians to become a part of their program is they gonna pimp out their women. Besides, the poor Indians would have had less reason to complain that the English took away their land if they had received it by way of portion with their daughters. Wow. Did I not just say you took on the nature of these people? You got niggas who call themselves pimps today. And a lot of us have called one another, what up, pimp? Diabolical. The poor Indians would have had less reason to complain that the English took away their land if they had received it by the way of portion with their daughters. Had such affinities been contracted in the beginning, how much bloodshed had been prevented, and how populous would the country have been, and consequently how considerable. Nor would the shade of the skin have been any reproach at this day. For if a Moor may be washed white in 3 generations, surely an Indian might have been blanched in 2. They thought. It didn't work. It didn't work. You know why? Because ain't no Anglo-Saxon, Afro-Eurasian, Roman chinos coming on your block, coming in your neighborhood, coming in your hood, and just start mating with people. Stop. But about the year 1620, a large swarm of dissenters fled thither from the severities of their stepmother, the church. But about the year 1620, a large swarm of dissenters fled thither from the severities of their stepmother, the church. These saints conceiving the same aversion to the copper complexion of the natives. These saints conceiving the same aversion to the copper complexion of the natives with that of the first adventurers to Virginia, would on no terms contract alliances with them, afraid perhaps like the Jews of old, lest they might be drawn into idolatry by those strange women. Like them women would have just been started messing with them. Come on, man. They think very little of our people, man. They really do. They really do. The fire is made in the middle, according to the Hibernian fashion, the smoke whereof finds no other vent but at the door, and so keeps the whole family warm at the expense both of their eyes and complexion. The Indians have no standing furniture in their cabins, but hurdles to repose their persons upon, which they cover with mats and deer skins. We were conducted to the best apartments in the fort. Which just before had been made ready for our reception and adorned with new mats that were very sweet and clean. The young men had painted themselves in a hideous manner, not so much for ornament as terror. In that frightful equipage, they entertained us with sundry war dances, wherein they endeavored to look as formidable as possible. The instrument they danced to was an Indian drum, that is, a large gourd with the skin braced tight over the mouth of it. The dancers all sang to the music, keeping exact time with their feet, rhythm, while their heads and arms were screwed into 1,000 menacing postures. They pop locking. They popping, they pop locking. Upon this occasion, the ladies had arrayed themselves in all their finery. They were wrapped in their red and blue match coats. Red and blue match coats, okay? The English, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Anglos, the Slavics, the Afro-Eurasians, the Chinos, the Romans, they ain't know nothing about no red and blue match coats, thrown so negligently about them that their mahogany skins appeared in several parts. We know what mahogany look like, and it ain't no Native American. And I don't care if a Native American's standing with us. I don't care if Native Americans speaking out on this. It ain't no Native American, no mahogany skin. Stop fronting. Stop acting like you know the truth. No, you don't know the truth. While you still wearing that costume, you still don't know the truth because you still don't understand that mahogany skin ain't the skin that you got on your body. So stop it. Gracefully bow out. Take off the Party City costume. Their hair was braided with white and blue peak and hung gracefully in a large roll upon their shoulders. Though their complexions be a little sad colored, yet their shapes are very straight and well proportioned. Their faces are seldom handsome, yet they have an air of innocence and bashfulness that with a little less dirt would not fail to make them desirable. Such charms might have had their full effect upon men who had been so long deprived of female conversation, but that the whole winter soil was so crusted on the skins of those dark angels. Dark angels. Do you still see the American woman? Do you still see sisters as dark angels? Or have you let foreigners come and pit you against the American woman? An American woman? Have you let foreigners come and pit you against the American man? You two American Indians should be ashamed of yourselves. It shouldn't be this easy, right? The American Dictionary of the English Language. Let's go back for a second. Okay. Let's go back for a second. Let's go back. Let's go back. Here we go. But about the year 1620, a large swarm of dissenters fled thither from the severities of their stepmother, the church. These saints conceiving the same aversion to the copper complexion of the natives of America, right? The copper complexion of the natives of America, right? American Dictionary of the English Language, 1828, Noah Webster. American Dictionary of the English Language. American is defined. You've seen it a trillion times at this point. American, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. We weren't lost. But now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. We see it, copper-colored, and we know it's just some. They saw who they saw, and they saw some copper-colored people. They saw some people that was my complexion, hair braided and all that. The name American must always exalt the pride of patriotism. See? They got it down to a science already. They didn't even need the They didn't even need the little scientists locked away in the basement of Google and shit like that. They knew the name American must always exalt the pride of patriotism. That's the science of it. And to this day, they are more patriotic than you, and you are the American. The only one there ever was, is, and will be. So we're at etymology online, the etymology of words. Another source online or whatever. Who cares? It's words that somebody else wrote. None of it matters. The only thing matters is that we are who we are. Period. Nig, circa 1300, as an abbreviated form of nigger. The word is attested by 1832 in American English. American English. It didn't say the king and queen's English. It said American English. Why? Because we speak American. English is the language that people all over the planet speak so they can communicate with one another. We speak American. Okay? It is noted in an 1879 British book on colonial household management as a term too often applied to the Indian natives. Nig. My nig. National Archives, Dawes Rolls. The Dawes Rolls, also known as the final rolls, are, see, now we getting into all this dumb paperwork stuff, Now we getting into all this deception. Now we getting into all this trickery, the spells, this magic. You know what I mean? The Dawes Rolls, also known as the final rolls, are the list of individuals who were accepted as eligible for tribal membership in the 5 civilized tribes. And you know what? Today, some people get on your nerves, man, because they always talking this card carrying Indian stuff, this card carrying Native American stuff. And it's the weirdest thing you could ever see, man. You mean to tell me which one of y'all ever needed an ID card to get in Thanksgiving dinner? To get into your grandmama's house for Thanksgiving dinner? You needed an ID card for that? Cherokees, Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Seminoles. It does not include those whose applications were stricken, rejected, or judged as doubtful. Those found eligible for the final rolls were entitled to an allotment of land, usually as a homestead. See, the problem is that not the it's not so much as, I don't want to so much talk about the things that have already happened that you can't change. The things that have happened, they already happened. You can't change those things. But the fact that you think these goofies are at the top of the food chain because they have this they're so much more intelligent than you. They're so much more aware than you. It's mind-blowing. These people is goofies. These people love their written words, their writing. They love to spell. They love spelling. Cherokees, Creeks, and then you got now you got nuggers who actually is running around here wearing the same clothes that all these Native Americans wear all around this country. Come on, man, with the buckskin pants and all that, and Party City costumes, man. Those found eligible for the final roles were entitled to an allotment of land, usually as a homestead. It says the rolls contained more than 101,000 names from 1898 to 1914. Okay, 1898 to 1914. Keep these dates. Remember these dates. I'm not saying like remember them, study them and remember them. No, I'm just saying think about the times that we're talking about. We're talking about from the first thing we touched on was the immigrants who came from, late 1400s, early 1500s to 1820s, roughly. And now we're seeing the Dawes Rolls at 1898, roughly, right? We're talking about a time period that you've been told that millions upon millions upon millions of so-called African people were stolen, and thousands of trips that took 3 months a piece, back and forth, straight trips, the course back and forth, straight line, this and that and the third. No problems with the weather, no problems with the water. You've been told that this was the method. This is the reason why you here. This the reason why your people was here. Now see, again, your burden is genealogy. Your burden is to trace your family. Learn who your family is. But you know what? At this point, to be honest with you, nobody else needs to really do. Please don't let this discourage you from doing your genealogy, because I do it every day. It's a wonderful thing. It's really one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done. But to be honest with you, when you start doing it and you start reading this American history and things like that, you realize something. You don't really need to prove yourself to nobody. It's time to go get what's yours. Today, these 5 tribes continue to use the Dawes Rolls as the basis for determining tribal membership, not on their own accord, not because they want to, they have to. They're not in control of who they are. They are owned, just like everyone in these entertainment fields. They are owned. They have to. They usually require applicants to provide proof of descent from a person who is listed on these rolls. So understand what's happening here. A foreigner is going to determine whether or not you are from this soil. I mean, this is trickery at its finest. This is trickery at its finest. It's a disgusting thing. If your ancestors' tribe is not identified in the 1900 census, if your ancestors' tribe is not identified in the 1900 census, once you find where your ancestor was living, you can consult books such as The Indian Tribes of North America by John R. Swanton for information on the tribes living in each state. Other good sources are A Guide to the Indian Tribes of Oklahoma by Muriel H. Wright and The Indians of Texas by W. W. Newcomb Jr. for tribes in those areas. So essentially what they're telling you is look into these books, and these books are going to tell you the names of the peoples who were in those areas where your people perhaps were. On the 1900 census, if your people were in, let's just say if they were in Tuskegee, Alabama, this book, The Indian Tribes of North America by John R. Swanson, he's going to tell you what peoples were in that area. So you can then say, oh, those are my people. Because a foreigner told me who my people are yet again. Man, stop, man. Take your book and go home, man. Remember what I said. We were just talking about 1898, right? Was the beginning of the Dawes Rolls, right? Roughly. So this is from newspapers.com. The Sun, New York, New York. The Sun newspaper, New York, New York. Wednesday, October 12th, 1898. 1898. Wednesday, October 12th, 1898. You know where your people was in 1898, or at least some of them? 1898, not a long time ago. It's like yesterday. And remember all these dates we just went through. I'm not saying I laid down a real clear timeline, like wrote it, like 1800, 1810, 1820. But I've been saying pay attention to the dates. Pay attention to the dates, because when you pay attention to the dates, a lot of the stuff that you've been indoctrinated with just don't make sense. It don't make no natural sense. And again, we've come to another date, 1898, the Sun newspaper, New York, New York. The Squaw Men. It can be well understood that the Dawes Commission has stirred up an excitement in the Indian Territory by its declaration that the white settlers there, who are husbands of Indian women, are intruders within the meaning of the statutes. Among the Cherokees alone, there are thousands of such squaw men. Squaw men. You know what I mean? They say squaw men, white settlers who are husbands of Indian women. Among the Cherokees alone, there are thousands of such squaw men, as the Indians expressively call them, and the 5 tribes as a whole include a great number. The 5 tribes contain a great number. So what we're speaking of here, they're saying Indians, they mean Native Americans, and we're talking about all the same people. These are all the same people. We're talking about Anglo-Saxons, Chinos, Romans, Afro-Eurasians, okay? We're not talking about Americans. We're not talking about your people. We're not talking about the only Americans there ever were, are, and will be. We're not talking American Indians. We're talking squaw men, as the Indians expressively called them. And the 5 tribes as a whole include a great number of squaw men, of Anglo-Saxons. The reason of the order, however, is not difficult to see. Congress, in creating the Dawes Commission, authorized it to negotiate with the Indians for giving up their present tribal forms of government and tribal allegiance for a regular territorial government with American citizenship, and as a step thereto, to induce them to accept severalty allotments in place of the ownership of lands in common. Mr. Dawes, the chairman of the commission, as the chief promoter of the severalty allotment law, while he was in Congress, naturally sets great store by it. The law necessarily accepted from its operations the 5 civilized tribes because the government's treaties with them allowed them their own methods of land holding. So we have foreigners giving treaties to other foreigners. Excuse me. I'm pretty sure some of us is mixed in this whole goofiness. Some of us are definitely mixed in at certain levels. Listen, none of this stuff would have been possible if some of the Americans didn't participate. Of course, however, it has always been possible to negotiate with these tribes for that severalty allotment which the Dawes Commission desires. But one obstacle arises at the outset in ascertaining exactly what members of a tribe would be entitled to severalty allotments. The Indians have intermarried with whites and with other tribes, so that the question of the degree of tribal blood that gives a title to full membership in the tribe is complicated. No, it's not complicated. We have foreigners writing laws and writing laws for other foreigners and hoping that we participate. And then they really don't even care if we participate, as long as they all can agree that they're going to go by these laws and statutes and all this paperwork garbage. However, the law allows the tribe to be its own judge, and Congress empowered the Dawes Commission to revise the tribe. Remember, Dawes Commission 1898. Remember that. Just came about. These people love to do meetings. They love to talk amongst one another. They love to hear themselves as well as each other talk. However, the law allows the tribe to be its own judge, and Congress empowered the Dawes Commission to revise the tribal roles under these tribal regulations. We may assume, therefore, that the tribes approve of treating the squaw men as intruders, especially since to admit them to tribal rights, including that of land ownership, would make a greater number of people among whom to divide the land wherever severalty allotments may be established. Foreigners fighting over our stuff, over who's gonna take how much of our stuff. On the other hand, the report that there is to be war in the Indian Territory on account of the Dawes Commission's order seems to be exaggerated. To begin with, the wives of the squaw men will be able to stay and exercise their own tribal rights. Again, the Choctaws and Chickasaws are the only tribes that have agreed thus far to the allotment in severalty. These are all politicians. A recent estimate of the Indian population compiled from the record of the agent at Muskogee gives the number of Chickasaws who have married whites as 318 and the number of Choctaws as 950. It is thus clear that only a very small proportion of the inhabitants of the Choctaw and Chickasaw reservations can be affected by this order. The Cherokees, who number more than double any other tribe, have not accepted severalty allotment, so that the question with them can hardly have taken practical shape. But the intruder question proper far antedates the appointment of the Dawes Commission and concerns not only the squaw men, but the entire white population of the Indian Territory, which enormously exceeds the Indian population. These white intruders include all of those who, from one reason or another, and in some cases perhaps by virtue of direct invitation of the Indians or by their sufferance, live in the Indian Territory. The interests of this great body of whites are not identical with those of the squaw men, since the latter are closely united with the tribes through their wives and children, whereas other whites seek to acquire land holding and other privileges, often in the opposition to the tribes. So again, we have foreigners who are mixing and mingling with other foreigners. The government long ago pledged itself to keep while our people are where they were and where they are and probably where they always were, chilling, to keep the Indian Territory for the tribes. And the Indians have for many years called upon it to expel all who should be designated by them as intruders. But the obligation was neglected at first, and now with the vast growth of the white population, is one from which the government shrinks, seeking instead some other solution of the difficulty. Now, I would properly call those who they are calling Indians Native Americans, but I am going to read it as it is. As we understand the matter, the current excitement has been caused not by any proceedings to expel from the territory the vast number of intruding whites, but only by the notification of the Dawes Commission to a squaw man who had applied to have himself and his family enrolled on the severalty allotment list of the Chickasaws, that his name could not be placed there, and that no white man could share in the tribal lands. It is difficult to see how the squaw man could hope to set aside the decision under the laws, or what they would have to gain by threatening forcible resistance to it. Newspapers.com, the Kalamazoo Gazette newspaper, Kalamazoo, Michigan. The Kalamazoo Gazette newspaper, Kalamazoo, Michigan, October 15th, 1898. Saturday, October 15th, 1898. Again, this is in the year 1898, just like the previous article that we just went over. The Kalamazoo Gazette, 1898. This is the inception of the Dawes Commission, the Dawes rolls. You know, the role you got to go to get your ID card to be a part of your family, right? Supposedly that's your family, right? It ain't mine. This article says white Indians angry. See what I mean? I would change that Indians properly to Native Americans, because that's all they is. They people who born here. That's it. They foreigners. But I'm going to read it as written. White Indians angry, refuse to leave their homes among the Cherokees. Sound like squatters. It may mean deadly warfare. Threaten to resist with arms the demands of the United States government based on reports of the Dawes Commission. Natives too protest against interference. It is feared that war is imminent in the Indian Territory. It is not the Sioux, the Comanches, or the Apaches this time whose interests are involved, but the civilized Cherokees, the five nations whose rights from the beginning of the government have been recognized by the powers of Washington. Treaty after treaty has been made only to be legally violated in the great bunco game that has been played by the land speculators, the mineral grabbers. The mineral grabbers sound familiar? United States company going somewhere else, causing all manner of problems for the minerals of that place. The mineral grabbers, through their lobbies in Congress and the various departments of the government, to protect these children of nature who did not butcher people and desolate adjoining countries with their ravages. Laws were passed making it illegal for white men to travel through the territory or to intrude upon them against their wishes, but favored white men gradually drifted in, married into Indian families, and in the process of evolution became members of the tribes. There are now 20,000 men thus intermarried in that territory. The government, under the ruling of the Dawes Commission, has ordered them to leave the territory. They know their rights and say they will maintain them. Incidentally, they are well armed with Winchester rifles. They threaten to resist what they call the unwarranted and illegal action of the government in attempting to deprive them of their property and rights. It is said that the full-blooded Indians do not object to the government's orders so far as the banished whites are concerned. But this is not altogether true. 2 years ago, a delegation from the five nations was sent to Washington, protesting against the Indian legislation. They claimed that the bill was the result of a political conspiracy to invade the Indian reservation and disrupt the territory. They now declare, after half a century of progress in which the Indian of our tribes has fulfilled, so far as his racial characteristics permit, all the demands of 19th century civilization, this government of liberty, which has clamored so loudly for Indian reform and promised so much should civilization finally prevail among the Indians, now comes to us and says, we are dissatisfied with you. and your civilization. We are aware that you have constructed your governments, maintained courts of law, educated lawyers and judges, built towns, formed businesses, corporations, erected schools and colleges, but we are dissatisfied and you must give it all up. The government's annulment of our treaties will fall with appalling effect upon the Indians. They would become dispirited. Discontent would arise. In fact, surrendering themselves to despair, they would in that case really deteriorate rather than rise to a higher state of civilization. White intermarried men were allowed citizenship under Indian laws and voted and held offices. Their rights were never questioned until last fall, when the Dawes Commission declared they had no right to share the lands. The squaw men, as they are called, organized an association for the purpose of tightening this order, but have never pushed it, as they thought the order would not be enforced. The commission, of which former Senator Dawes of Massachusetts is chairman, arrived recently from Washington and convened in the Chickasaw Nation. Their first official orders were to declare all squaw men intruders. Mounted police are to be called into service to eject these men, who declared they will fight until death before being separated from their families and lands. The Dawes Commission made this ruling immediately upon their return from Washington this spring, but its full meaning was never realized until recently. At Paul's Valley, IT, in the Chickasaw Nation, David Rennie, a wealthy intermarried citizen, came before the commission and asked that he and his family be enrolled. There was no objection to the family, but the commission said they could not enroll him, a white man. While it was his privilege to marry an Indian woman, he could not share any of the tribal lands. This was a bomb in the ranks of the intermarried citizens, but excitement was increased by additional orders notifying them that all whites who married Indians and had settled upon Indian lands were intruders and would be treated accordingly. This reminds me of a movie that was made recently, and I believe 2023 or something like that. Here is the government's, some about moon or something like that, flower moon or something. Here is the government's side of the question as given out at Washington. The work assigned to the Dawes Commission is to induce the 5 civilized tribes to accept allotments of their lands in severalty, to revise the roles of tribal membership, and to induce the tribes to agree to the organization of a territorial form of government in the Indian Territory. The work of the commission has been very slow, as the Indians have been reluctant to agree to any revision of their original treaties with the United States. The commission has warned them, however, that the Congress is resolved to bring about the proposed reforms and establish law in the Indian Territory. Even though it may be necessary to use force, some results have been obtained. The territory has been divided into three judicial districts, and the United States courts have been established, and the Choctaws and Chickasaws have agreed to the allotment of land in severalty. The Boston Herald. Remember, that article was 1898. This is, and the Dawes Commission, 1898 was the beginning of that, I believe. Somewhere around there. This is from the National Archives, the Dawes Rolls. It says from the picture is Will Rogers and his wife in 1935. Will's application to the Dawes Commission in 1900 was accepted, and he was enrolled as a member of the Cherokee Nation. So all you niggas trying to be enrolled in the Cherokee Nation, one of the five civilized tribes and become a card carrying member. Understand, Will Rogers and his wife, 1935, Will's application to the Dawes Commission in 1900 was accepted. So you will be a family member of Will Rogers if you do that. Is he really a part of your family? Probably not. When your grandmother or great grandmother said that y'all was Cherokee, was she talking about the same Cherokee that Will Rogers is now? Probably not. They still everything else. You think they ain't still a name? Tribe members were entitled to an allotment of land in return for abolishing their tribal governments and recognizing federal laws. The first application process for enrollment began in 1896 but was declared invalid, so the Dawes Commission started all over again. In 1898, people had to reapply in order to be considered, even if they had already applied in 1896. The commission accepted applications from 1898 until 1907. In 1907, side note, Ellis Island immigration, the wave upon the wave upon wave of foreigner start coming here again. This is another wave of Europeans, Anglo-Saxons, Chinos, Romans, whatever you want to call them, Afro-Eurasians, with a few additional people accepted by an act of Congress in 1914. This is from Good Housekeeping. 24 famous indigenous and Native Americans making history. These influential actors, artists, and celebrities are bringing Native culture into the spotlight. By Christina Montoya Fiedler. 2024. These are your Native Americans and pictured here. You know, the people who are said to be from our paradise, our tropical paradise. On its website, the National Museum of the American Indians states that Native people prefer to be called by their specific tribal names. I'm sure they do. They do not want to be called American Indians because they are not American Indians. In the United States, there are 574 federally recognized Native American tribes. All that means is there are 574 federally recognized groups of foreigners, making for an incredible diversity in culture and way of life. No, it's really not a diversity or diversity in culture and way of life. All these people look the same. They all dress the same. They all scream the same. When they're beating that drum, they all do the same rhythmless two-step. They all talk the same. We have no idea what their food is. What do these people eat? What do these people eat? I'm sure these people eat a combination of corn, beans. In order to try to stick with the narrative, I'm sure they eat corns and beans and cactus leaves every day. Unfortunately, Native American representation in popular culture has long been saddled with offensive stereotypes, caricatures, and mascots. Famous Native Americans are continuing to break barriers in science, politics, cooking, sports, and more, including excelling as business owners and authors. If you look at the Native Americans and they talk about these people, pay attention to, think about the American Indians. Think about the copper-colored people. You know, the quote copper-colored people. We know we come in more shades of, our complexion are not all copper-colored. You know, we're different complexions here. The American Indians, okay? The Americans, okay? Think about us. Think about the thousands upon thousands of things that the Americans have produced, have invented. Think about the soul food. Think about the soul people. America, America, soul people, people of soul. You understand? Think about the American Indians. Think about the people painted on those castles and churches in Germany that we went through. Think about who is copied all over the world, who is imitated all over the world. It's very flattering, too. Don't get me wrong. Don't forget, we're speaking of Native Americans here. Oscar winning actress Lily Gladstone made history by speaking Blackfoot language on the stage of the Academy Awards. Why would she make history by speaking Blackfoot language? I mean, she did go to school to learn a language, right? See, many people think these people speak these things because they've been speaking them for thousands of years. These people went to schools and learned those things, just like their parents did, and possibly their great grandparents. While poet laureate Joy Harjo shares her powerful words every day, Sterling Harjo brought indigenous culture to the screen with his show Reservation Dogs, while Link Ray influenced the development of rock and roll. Now they're saying a Native American influenced the development of rock and roll. How disgusting. I don't have to get into it because we all know the truth. This is Lily Gladstone. She's a pagan Blackfoot. Lily Gladstone is an actress. She's in the show Killers of the Flower Moon. I think I mentioned earlier, I was like Flower Moon. I didn't really know what the name of the movie was, but this woman was in that movie, and that movie was depicting American Indians. It was depicting our people, or some of our people, some Americans, not all. Your people, I don't know where they were during this time. My people, I know where my people were. And just like my people, I'm sure, or your family members or your people weren't the bending over type. I'm sure they don't fold. You know what I mean? So all this stuff, it happened to certain people, just like today. Certain things are happening to certain people in different places, and they don't affect you. Not everything affects everyone. So this woman is a Native American. Okay. And if you pay attention, she's pink. She's a pale pinkish color. You see the rosy cheeks? Yeah, that is definitely not the complexion of someone who lives in a tropical place, a subtropical place. You mean to tell me that that if you see this woman walking down a street in Mississippi or Alabama, you not gonna think to yourself she look out of place? Come on, man. Let's move on. Let's keep going. So here's another Native American right here. His name is Sterling Harjo. It says he's a Seminole and Muskogee. This is another Native American right here. Again, does he look like someone who is sprouted up in a subtropical place? Sterling Harjo is a director of film and television focusing on Native American actors. He executive produced, directed, and co-wrote the groundbreaking comedy drama series Reservation Dogs on FX. Here's another Native American right here. Wes Studi. He's supposedly a Cherokee. And here is another Native American. Anglo-Saxon, clearly an Anglo-Saxon. It says he's a Shawnee. He's a Shawnee. It says this is Link Ray, legendary guitar player popular in the 50s who helped establish the modern sound of rock and roll in the 50s. It says he helped establish that with his use of distortion. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023 as part of the musical influence category. The Hall of Fame calls Ray the original punk. I probably was a punk. A lot of punks. The inventor of the power chord, and describes his 1958 single Rumble as the most influential and enduring rock guitar instrumental of all times. His mother was Shawnee. Yeah, I bet his mother was Shawnee. And here we have Vincent Neil Emerson. He's a Choctaw Apache. Okay. And here we have a woman who is Siberian. No, wait. I'm sorry. This is a Native American. This is Lauren Goodday. She's a Arikara, Hidatsa, Blackfeet, Plains Cree. And she is wearing the same adornments that all Native Americans seem to wear. This is another Native American woman. If you saw her walking down the street, you would think she was an Anglo-Saxon. Think she could prove that she's not. She is a Cherokee. Kay Walking Stick. Her name is Kay Walking Stick. She doesn't sport the Party City costume, but she has the Party City costume name. Walking Stick. And this is Creed Humphrey. He's a Potawatomi Nation, a native of Shawnee, Oklahoma, and a graduate of the University of Oklahoma. Creed Humphrey is the current center for the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're looking at a Native American right here. Clearly Anglo-Saxon. This is another, I guess he's a Native American, is the Jason Momoa, Pawnee, a native Hawaiian. Pawnee. Pretty sure he got a indigenous Hawaiian maybe in his bloodline. And here we have another Native American woman dressed pretty much the same as the other Siberian woman. She has like a tattoo on her chin, so I'm going to assume that she's from Alaska. She is Dine Lakota. Quani Chasing Horse. Her name is Chasing Horse. Quana Chasing Horse. Quana Chasing Horse is an indigenous model and activist with a shared heritage of Lakota and Navajo ancestry. She is known for using her platform to support indigenous sovereignty and sustainability. Sovereignty and the sustainability, y'all got thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of soil that y'all didn't do nothing with. She made headlines at the 2022 Met Gala by combining contemporary looks with intricate native jewelry and headpieces. Again, Party City outfit. That's all. That's their culture. Party City costumes. This is Gil Birmingham. He's a Comanche. He's another Native American. Here's Louis Gong. He's from Nooksack, another Native American, another made up name, another made up tribe name. Tommy Orange, Cheyenne, Arapaho. He's another Native American. If you notice, we don't see any copper colored people. Where are the copper colored people spoken of by the early visitors to America? Was Noah Webster that stupid? Sharice Davids, she's a ho chunk. She's a ho chunk. She's a Native American. Hoop earrings don't even look right on her. They don't even look natural on her. But when sisters had her hoop earrings on, they look very natural, right? Here is another Native American, Deb Haaland, Laguna Pueblo. Native American woman. Do she look like? How long do you think this woman could sit out in the tropical Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas sun? How long y'all think she could sit out there before she start cooking? Kent Monkman, he's a Cree, Native American. Juan Quick to See Smith. That's her. She's Native American. That's her Indian. That's her Native American name. Quick to See. Quick to See. I'm telling you, they don't have the Party City uniform. They don't have the Party City costume, but they got the Party City costume name. Quick to See. This is another Native American woman. Joy Harjo. She's a Muskogee Creek, is what it says. Muskogee Creek. Another Native American woman. Yep, they expect us to believe this stuff. Sherry Matson, Omaha, Ponca, another Native American woman. Or East Asian, same thing. And here is one of possibly the most prestigious Native Americans. John Harrington, he's a Chickasaw. In 2002, John Harrington became the first member of a Native American tribe to fly in space. His mission took him to the International Space Station, where he honored his heritage by carrying 6 eagle feathers, a braid of sweet grass, 2 arrowheads, and the Chickasaw Nation's flag on a planned spacewalk. He is also a retired United States naval aviator and engineer. John Harrington, Chickasaw, first Chickasaw to walk in space. Yep. Unbelievable. So here we go. Wendy Red Star. Wendy Red Star. Wait a minute. The Chickasaw astronaut. No more illusions. That's a Chickasaw right there. That's a Chickasaw Native American astronaut, okay? Think about this. Native American Chickasaw astronaut. Did you ever hear 3? Can you imagine 3 more fake things together? Wendy Red Star, Absoluki, Wendy Red Star, another party. I mean, this woman, the outfit, everything says Siberia. Wendy Red Star, the Party City description of the costume. And here we have Sean Sherman. He's a Sioux. He got the 2 braids. That means he's for real. He's a for real Native American with the 2 braids. Here we have Timoris Lane, Golden Eagle Clan, Lumi Nation. Oh, and here we have Winona. Winona is a popular Native American name. I've heard that before. Winona Leduc. I can't even pronounce the tribe she with. Ojibwe. This woman is a Native American. Okay, here we go. Christina Montoya Fiedler. This is another Native American woman. Okay, this is from history. At peak Most immigrants arriving at Ellis Island were processed in a few hours. In 1907, no passports or visas were needed to enter the United States through Ellis Island. In fact, no papers were required at all. This is published in 2018. More than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954, with a whopping 1,004,756 entering the United States in 1907 alone. Its busiest year. 12 million immigrants through Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954. In 1907 alone, 1,004,756 slid through. Barry Moreno, historian and librarian at the Ellis Island Immigration Museum, says most Ellis Island passengers in 1907 came from Europe, with Italians comprising the largest number of immigrants. They had to start immigration procedures really fast because there were so many passengers, often as many as 2,000 to 3,000 passengers from all classes. They call these people passengers. But when they made up the story to say that your people was doing this instead of these people, when they substituted Africans with these people, what these people are technically Africans, because Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, and Asia are one landmass. So technically these are Africans. But when they told you that the Africans were your people and they substituted these people with you, they called you slaves, chattel slavery. But they call these people passengers. It's 2,000, 3,000 crammed on a boat. But they passengers from all classes. Moreno says, of course they from all classes. What you gonna say? Somebody rich and somebody poor out of them 2,000-3,000 people crammed on a boat? That matter? I don't think that matter. Ain't no first class if 3,000 people is crammed together. You could have as many as 1,500 passengers in third class alone. Yeah, but the other 1,500 is in third class as well because it's 1,500 of them. Now, in 1907, no passports or visas were needed to enter the United States, he says. In fact, no papers were required at all. All you had to do was verbally give information to the official when you boarded ship in Europe. Did you hear that? All you had to do was verbally give information to the official when you boarded ship in Europe, and that information was the only information used when they arrived. Immigrants who were mostly peasants, poor Jews, or small townspeople. Immigrants who were mostly peasants, poor Jews, or small townspeople. The doctors also had to know a few words of instruction in many languages. Most of the immigrants were illiterate, even in their own languages, Moreno notes. And by 1907, the doctors had already developed a secret code system using a piece of chalk. They would mark the passengers' clothes. They told you that they was bringing people over from Africa and they was branding those people. But as we can see here, these people are being branded with a piece of chalk. Those marked, Moreno says, were removed from the line and taken across the room where you were locked in a pen, a cage called the doctor's pen, until the doctors were free to continue further examinations or questioning. Those who passed inspection were simply sent on their way with no official paperwork. So now we go to a picture. If you have visited this channel before, you've probably seen this picture before. If not, take a look. I'm not in the business of trying to figure out what other people are thinking or what's on their minds. But because people have such a distorted understanding of what was happening during the time of the Confederacy and the Civil War and things like this, there are those amongst us who will see this picture and they will say that homie in the middle is a slave. They will say that. They will say he is a we sick boss type of nigga. That's what will be said. I know it. I know it. I know it. If you're hearing me say this, then of course you won't say it because I just said it and you don't want to be the person who I'm speaking of. But there are those who would call this man a slave. They would. I know it. I know it. Just because a nigga around that time, there's no way he could be anything but, right? So we're going to look at the description of this picture. This is from the Cook collection, The Valentine. Original author, it says unknown, created 1907. Think about that. We just read about the Ellis Island, the 2,000, 3,000 people on one ship coming through Ellis Island, all Anglo-Saxons, most of them Italians, right? This also is in 1907. Valentine Richmond History Center, Confederate reunion, circa 1907. This picture is of a Confederate reunion. It says that they are sporting badges from a Confederate reunion. It was probably made during the United Confederate Veterans National Reunion that was held in Richmond, Virginia in 1907. The two men in uniform wear caps with pins that spell out CAV, perhaps a reference to their having served in the Confederate cavalry. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. The African American man at the center. Now, this is 1907. There is no such thing as an African American in 1907. The African American is a new creation. So, why are they calling homie an African American? Where they called, it says, now, think about what they called the two men who were sitting down. They said the two men in uniform wear caps with pins that spell out CAV. But homie that's standing up, they call him the African American man. Why didn't they just say the man standing? Think about this. Think about this. The African American man at the center, with his arms on the shoulders of the ex-soldiers, shares a common surname with them and perhaps accompanied the men to war as a body servant. The image conveys the lost cause point of view that accentuates the role of African Americans as faithful slaves, loyal to their masters and the Confederate cause. What did I tell you? What I tell you? See, this is what the Valentine Richmond History Center, this is the propaganda that they put out to you. Cook collection, the Valentine Richmond History Center. See, I told you that he had to be a slave, right? in order to keep the lie alive. 1907. Same time, waves and waves of foreigners is coming through Ellis Island. A program of partners and affiliates. University of Virginia, National Endowment for the Humanities, Library of Virginia is where the picture is from. And as you heard, the African American was probably followed. He probably came there as a servant to their bodies. What did it say? I want to know it. Read exactly what it says. It says the African American man at the center with his arms on the shoulders of the ex-soldier shares a common surname with them, and perhaps a common surname with them. How are they telling us he had a common surname with them? Give us more information. Where's the link so that we can know that these three men have the same surname with them and perhaps accompanied the men to war as a body servant? The image conveys the lost cause point of view that accentuates the role of African Americans as faithful slaves, loyal to their masters and the Confederate cause. Faithful slaves, African Americans. No such thing as an African American in 1907, and faithful slaves. You know why they put African Americans there? Because most of y'all call y'allself African American today. And they had to connect you to it. They had to connect you to the faithful slave. This is the Library of Virginia, Encyclopedia of Virginia. Okay. Now, I went to imageprompt.org and wanted to do a AI describe image. I know AI. I know the database. I know it's a combination of a lot of different things that are input. But from what I gather, it is unbiased. It is going to give you the information that's there. Okay. It's going to dig into all the information that's there and compile it for you. Imageprompt.org, AI describe image. So I uploaded the image we just looked at of what they say, the African American, the loyal slave, to the two men who are seated in uniform. And I put that image in and I asked a custom question. I asked, is the man in the center of the image an African American? And the generate description, the answer that I got, the man in the center of the image appears to be of African descent. I asked another custom question. Which man is American in this image? The man in the middle of the image wearing a dark suit is the only person in the image who can be definitively identified as American. The other two men are also likely American, but their nationalities are not evident from the image alone. Oh, man. See how this works? Is the man in the center of the image an African American? The man in the center of the image appears to be of African descent. Which man is American in this image? The man in the middle of the image wearing a dark suit is the only person in the image who can be definitively definitively identified as American. The other two men are also likely American. Remember, the 1828 Webster's American Dictionary of the English Language said that Americans, they have to be patriotic, right? The other two men are also likely American, but their nationalities are not evident from the image alone. Another custom question. I got a few questions here. Another custom question. What are the ranks of the men in the image based on their positions in the image? The generated description, the answer is the man in the center of the image appears to be of a higher rank than the other two men, judging by his attire and position. The man on the far left and the man on the far right are both in military uniforms, but the man in the center appears to have a more formal, possibly higher ranking civilian attire. Determining precise ranks from this image alone is not possible. Okay. Another custom question. I got questions. Which man in the image is in the position of authority? The generate description, the answer, the man in the middle wearing a dark suit appears to be in a position of authority, given his more prominent placement and attire. He is also positioned between the other two men, further suggesting a leadership role. The other two men are also in uniform, but their attire and position are less prominent than that of the man in the middle. Another custom question. Let's keep going. Is the man in the center an American Indian? Generate description, the answer. The man in the center of the image appears to be a person of color. Determining specific ethnic or tribal affiliations from an image alone is not possible. The man in the center of the image appears to be a person of color. Here we have it. Again, the image. We heard what the AI generated answers were to my custom questions. We heard what the Library of Virginia, how they described this man, how they disrespected this man. We saw that. We read that. The root. The root. More Africans immigrated to the U.S. in the 2000s than came by slave ship. By Diana Ozemaboya. Oromosili. Diana Ozemaboya Oromosili. September 30th, 2014. It's sort of weird. It's sort of a weird benchmark to use to illustrate just how many sub-Saharan Black Africans have immigrated to the United States over the past several years, but it's impactful. According to a New York Times report, more Black Americans, you hear that? More Black Africans moved to the U.S. between 2000 and 2010 than were brought to the North American continent by slave ship during the 3 centuries long Atlantic slave trade. Between 2000 and 2010, the number of legal black African immigrants in the United States about doubled to around 1 million, the Times reports. During that single decade, according to the most reliable estimates, more black Africans arrived in this country on their own than were imported directly to North America during the more than 3 centuries of the slave trade. Remember, they said the 3 centuries, more than 3 centuries of the slave trade. Earlier we talked about 1500s through the 1800s. That's 3 centuries, right? But we didn't hear anything about the slave trade. The only trade we saw was from Europe, right? Remember the timeline. The report explains how they're usually cherry-picked by American embassies, which screen for the certain qualifications so that the immigrants can hit the ground running when they get here and put their student and work visas to use. They're a self-selected population, Kim Nichols, an executive with the African Services Committee, explained. They have to be the most ambitious and have the means to get here, at least one plane ticket, and a fearlessness about coming to a new place. Like I said, pay attention to the timeline, and a lot of it just doesn't make sense. Do the right thing.